The message came at 8:43 p.m., just as I was rinsing out a glass and setting it to dry by the sink. The group chat family buzzed once. I dried my hands, reached for my phone, and read the first line twice. "We think it's best if Mom keeps her distance for a while." It was signed by Nolan, my only son. Not a call, not a conversation. Just a quiet dismissal dressed up in politeness. I stared at the screen. A second later, a thumbs up popped up from Fallon, his wife. The casual cruelty of it nearly stole my breath. Not even a word, just a gesture. Like she was approving a weather report. I hadn't spoken to them since Monday when I transferred the tuition money for Sophie's school and confirmed their insurance had renewed. Everything had seemed fine. I set the phone down, then picked it back up. "Understood," I wrote. "I'll also step back from covering the mortgage insurance and tuition." I hit send. The message sat beneath theirs, short, neat, final. I stood in the kitchen for a long while after that. The refrigerator hummed softly. The silence pressed in. I opened a cabinet and pulled out a teacup, but couldn't bring myself to fill it. My hand trembled as I set it back down. 7 minutes later, the phone lit up. Then again. And again. Call after call, name after name. Nolan. Fallon. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear what came next, not if it meant pretending I hadn't seen exactly what they meant. Not if it meant walking back what I knew I had to do. Instead, I walked to my desk and opened the locked drawer. Inside were the files. Bank records, home title documents, tuition agreements. I hadn't looked at them in months, but now I needed to remember exactly what I'd given and what they never thought I'd take back. The folder was heavier than I remembered. Maybe it was the weight of time, or maybe just the realization of how long I'd carried them without them ever noticing. I sat at my desk and flipped it open. Everything was there as I'd left it. Transfer receipts, printouts of wire confirmations, statements with neat, consistent figures. $7,000 a month every month for 7 years. Quiet, dependable, like clockwork. No questions asked, no conditions set. I never missed a date. I'd started helping when Nolan called one night, voice tight and hopeful, saying Fallon was expecting, and the insurance plan didn't cover maternity. I wired the money the next morning. That was before Sophie was born, before the second car lease, before the roof leak, before Fallon's job loss. I never saw it as a burden. I had the means, and I wanted them to live comfortably. I told myself I was investing in family, that maybe someday they'd look back and see me as a quiet anchor. Not the center of their lives, but something holding the edges together. When my husband died, I never imagined raising Nolan alone, but I did. I paid off our small house, skipped vacations, and kept working long after others retired. Every spreadsheet I ever handled at the firm was just practice for the balancing act at home. And when Nolan graduated, I thought I'd finally pass the finish line. But the calls never stopped. Just different needs, different emergencies. And I said yes over and over, because that's what mothers do when their children say, "We're trying our best." I was still wearing my wedding ring when I signed the check for their down payment. Still paying off Nolan's student loans when Sophie started daycare. I never remarried. I never asked them for anything. The money wasn't the point. It was what came with it. Presence, reliability, safety. And now they wanted distance. Not a conversation. Not a thank you. Just a thumbs up and a door quietly shut behind me. I closed the folder and pulled the last 3 years of statements from the drawer. It was time to calculate what silence had cost me. The printer hummed steadily as I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, watching the pages pile up. I had never printed these records before. I had never needed to. The numbers had lived quietly in my bank statements, unseen, unquestioned, like breathing automatic and uncelebrated. But now I needed to see them. $93,000 toward the mortgage. I highlighted it in yellow. It was broken into neat monthly payments first to help with the down payment, then to cover the jump in their interest rate, then again when Fallon lost her job. $78,000 in tuition. Highlighted in blue. That had started as a one-time favor when the preschool raised its fees. Then came kindergarten, then private school. I told myself I was doing it for Sophie, and I meant it. But it wasn't free. Not really. $18,000 in insurance. Fallon had cried on the phone that night, saying they'd be dropped if it didn't clear by morning. I'd wired the money before she finished her sentence. And $45,000 in other things, groceries, repairs, new tires, dentist bills. Every one of them documented, highlighted in green, like I was auditing a company that forgot I was on the board. I pulled the folder from the drawer again and slid in the fresh stack of paper. Then I reached for another document, one I hadn't looked at since the closing day. The home purchase paperwork. I unfolded it carefully. My name was still there. Not as a reference, as a co-signer. Technically, a co-owner. They had never refinanced. I'd signed those papers to help them qualify and assumed they'd take care of it later. But later never came. They thought the house was theirs. They thought I was just a wallet with no keys. I slid the title back into the folder and zipped it closed. On my phone, I opened the shared calendar and deleted my access. Birthdays. Doctor's appointments, school events, gone. Then I opened the banking app and canceled every scheduled transfer. The next tuition draft would bounce. The mortgage would come up short. And for the first time in years, I would not be the one fixing it. I found Sophie's binder under the passenger seat just as I was parking in front of their house. She must have dropped it when I picked her up for piano lessons last week. I wasn't planning to go in, just leave it by the door and send a quick text. I stepped onto the porch and reached for the handle when I heard voices inside. The front window was cracked open just enough. Fallon's voice floated through first. Now that she's out, I want the guest room turned into my office. There was a pause. Then Nolan quieter, almost uncertain. I'm not sure about cutting her off like that. Fallon scoffed. She's had enough of our life. We'll be fine without her until the next payment hits. I froze. The binder slid slightly in my arms, but I held on tight. The porch creaked beneath my feet, but they didn't notice. Fallon continued, her voice sharp. She's been too involved for too long. We need space, real space. She'll come around when the bills hit. She always does. They weren't fighting. They weren't grieving a misunderstanding. They were planning, comfortable, clear, and confident. I stepped back slowly, careful not to let the binder drop. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't knock. I walked back to my car and sat behind the wheel binder, resting in my lap, my fingers pressing into the spiral binding until they ached. They didn't know I was listening. They didn't think I would hear. They spoke as if I'd already been erased, and maybe in their minds I had. I started the engine and drove home in silence. At the next light, I reached for my phone and opened my voicemail. Sophie's message from last week still sat there, her little voice asking if I'd come to her play. I saved it again just in case. When I got home, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and began drafting a letter to my attorney. Because if they had room for an office now, they wouldn't need my name on the deed anymore. It came just after 9. I was folding laundry, something simple to quiet my thoughts, when the chime sounded. One new message. Sophie's name lit up the screen. I hesitated before pressing play. Her voice was soft, like she was curled up somewhere under a blanket. Hi, Grandma. I don't know why Mommy's mad. She said you're busy or sick or something, but I miss you. My play is next Friday. Can you still come? There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, waiting. Then she whispered, I saved you a seat. The message ended, but I let the silence linger. I sat on the edge of the bed, the basket of towels still warm beside me, and I cried without sound. Not for myself this time. Not for the betrayal or the erasure or even the loneliness. I cried for the small, confused voice that had done nothing wrong. I wiped my face and played the message once more. Then I forwarded it to my attorney with a short note. Need to discuss legal tuition setup. Want to ensure funds are only accessible for Sophie's benefit, not through her parents. It wasn't retaliation. It was redirection. For years, I had sent tuition money straight to the account Fallon managed. I never thought to ask for receipts. Never once imagined I'd need proof of intent. Now, I wanted a new structure, one that held Fallon out completely. Within the hour, my attorney replied. We set a call for the next day to draft a separate education trust. I didn't want to weaponize money, but I wasn't going to let Fallon use Sophie as a bridge to reach back into my wallet. I pulled out a small notepad and began writing down everything Sophie might need: school supplies, transportation, future summer programs. I wasn't leaving her behind. I just wasn't leaving the door open for anyone else to walk through. When the list was done, I folded it in half and tucked it beside the folder of records on my desk. The office was quiet when I arrived, just the way I needed it. Laura. My attorney met me with a calm nod and a fresh cup of coffee. We didn't waste time with small talk. I opened the blue folder and slid it across the table. I want to freeze the title, I said. No transfers, no refinancing, no sales without my written approval. She flipped through the documents, her brow tightening. You're still listed as co-owner. You're within your rights. And if they default, you could reclaim full ownership, she said, glancing up. But it would get messy. I shook my head. No confrontation, just structure. Quiet, clean lines. She nodded and began drafting the request. While she typed, I pulled out my phone and opened the tuition app. I'd been listed as the primary payer with Fallon tagged as the contact. It only took 3 clicks to remove her access. The final confirmation asked if I was sure. I was. Back home, I filed the paperwork and added Laura's updates to my records. The education trust for Sophie was moving forward, and the title freeze was in place by end of day. Legally, nothing dramatic had happened, but everything had shifted. They didn't know it yet. That night, I received a system alert from the mortgage company. Payment declined. I checked the details: insufficient funds. Fallon had always managed the drafts from their shared account. I had covered the overflow quietly each time the balance fell short. Not anymore. I closed the email and folded my hands in my lap. No guilt, no glee. Just a deep stillness, like exhaling after holding your breath too long. The house they built their life in, the one with the white shutters and the swing I paid for, was not entirely theirs. Not in name, not in record, not in the eyes of the law. And now it was a liability they had never prepared to carry alone. I stood up and crossed the room to the calendar. Sophie's play was 5 days away. I circled the date in pen. It started with a single notification: mortgage payment failed. By now, I had removed alerts from my main screen, but the email still came through. I read it once, then archived it. 2 days later, the tuition office called to confirm the change of access. They sounded cautious, polite. I assured them it was intentional and thanked them for their discretion. Then came the insurance notice. Policy suspended due to non-payment. I remembered Fallon's voice months ago, trembling about how they couldn't afford to lapse, not with Sophie's allergies. I had paid it then, quietly. That silence no longer served them. At 7:12 p.m., Fallon sent the first text. There's a mistake. Can we talk? I left it unread. By 9 p.m., the messages turned into calls. First from Fallon, then Nolan, then again. And again. 11 in total by midnight. No voicemails, just repeated ringing. I sat in the living room with the phone face down, the hum of each vibration dull against the table. At 12:41 a.m., the 12th call came. This time, he left a message. I waited before playing it. Maybe I wanted to hold on to the silence a little longer. Then softly, his voice. I didn't know she would do this. Please, Mom, we need to fix this. Not I'm sorry. Not. We were wrong. Just. We didn't expect this. The tone wasn't angry. It was panicked, like a child who finally realized the lamp won't come back together just because he wants it to. I stared at the phone and let the screen go dark. No reply. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and put on a pot of tea. I needed my mind clear. Calm. Resolved. They hadn't called when I stopped showing up to Sunday dinners. They hadn't called when Fallon deleted me from the holiday group chat. They hadn't called when they chose to remove me quietly as if I wouldn't notice. Now they needed a lifeline, but I had already pulled mine back. The text came just after noon as I was returning from the grocery store. Simple, casual, like any note from an old friend might be. Ran into Fallon at the mall. She said, "You're stepping back because of your health. Everything okay?" I stopped in the middle of my driveway. Thumb hovering over the screen. I read it twice, maybe 3 times before typing my reply. No, Martha. I stepped back because they asked me to. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. I sat in the car for a while, after that keys still in the ignition. I thought I was past the point where anything they said could surprise me. But somehow, hearing Fallon's version, the sanitized version, the one where I was fragile or fading instead of discarded, cut deeper than silence ever had. They hadn't just pushed me away. They had rewritten the reason. I walked inside, set down the groceries, and opened my laptop. I called Laura again. "I want to proceed with formal separation on all co-owned assets," I said. "Whatever's still shared, split it or close it." She was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" "Yes." No announcements, just clean lines. Quiet and legal. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger either. It was a kind of grieving. But grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. I spent the next hour pulling every document I could find, co-signed accounts, the remaining insurance policies, even the old vehicle title Fallon once asked me to help with. Anything my name touched, I listed. When I finished, I placed it all in a separate folder. This one wasn't blue, just plain gray. No attachments, no guilt. By evening, the sunset was sharp across the windows. I sat on the couch, tea cooling in my hands, and stared at the quiet house. Martha texted again, just 2 words this time, "I'm proud." I didn't reply, but I smiled. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I thought it might be Martha again, dropping by with coffee or news from the office. But when I looked through the small glass panel, I saw Nolan. He stood there thinner than I'd ever seen him. His shirt untucked, the dark circles beneath his eyes, giving him the look of someone who hadn't slept in days. I hesitated before unlocking the door. He caught my eye through the glass and whispered, "Please." I opened it just enough for his voice to reach me. "Mom, we made a mistake." His words were quiet, heavy. "Fallon's gone. She took her things last week. Sophie's with me now. She keeps asking about you. I miss you too." I stepped aside. "Come in." He followed me to the kitchen, shoulders hunched. I poured tea and set a cup in front of him. He held it, but didn't drink. "I know I don't deserve this," he said, "but I wanted you to hear it from me. I was wrong. About everything." I waited, letting the silence stretch. He shifted, nervous. "The house is behind again. I'm trying to manage, but without Fallon," I raised my hand. "This isn't about the house anymore. You'll stay in it for now, but we'll restructure everything. You'll repay 40% over time, 5 years monthly installments, no more transfers, no more hidden help." He blinked, stunned. 40%, I've already discussed it with my lawyer, I said. "This isn't punishment, it's a line. You need to learn to stand on your own." His hands trembled slightly as I slid the agreement across the table. The pen looked heavy in his fingers. He hesitated, then signed his name slowly. Each stroke, careful, deliberate. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "I'll pay it back, Mom. Every cent." I nodded once. Good. He stood pocketing the copy of the agreement. For the first time, he looked like a man facing consequences instead of running from them. That night, I laid out a second plate at the table for Sophie. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a narrow auditorium seat, the air full of whispers and the crinkle of programs. Sophie's play was already underway, and I could see her second row middle wearing paper wings and a crown made of gold foil. She scanned the crowd, once eyes darting until they landed on me. A small wave, a bright, nervous smile. I smiled back and lifted the small paper bag in my lap. Apple muffins, her favorite. Not for Nolan, not for Fallon, just for her. Afterward, she ran to me, arms flung wide, and I held her tight. I didn't say anything about the play or her lines or how proud I was. I didn't need to. She could feel it in the way I didn't let go too quickly. Nolan waited a few feet away, hands in his pockets. When Sophie went off with her friends, he came over. "She's been asking to see you every day," he said. "I told her you'd be here if you could." "I said I'd come," I replied. "And I did." He nodded. No requests, no calculations, just a man tired softer, trying to build something real. Since the agreement, he'd been consistent. The payments came on time, even if they were tight. He called once a week now, not to ask, but to talk. Sometimes about Sophie, sometimes about nothing at all. It wasn't warm yet, but it was real. That was enough. The house, after months of silence and slow unraveling, was finally in my name alone. No more shared ownership. No more hidden responsibility. They still lived there for now under clear terms. But it belonged to me. Fully. Quietly. Back at home, I hung a new calendar in the kitchen. This one wasn't shared. No synced schedules. No reminders set by anyone else. Just me. Doctor appointments, library returns, Sophie's next recital, and in the corner of each square, my own notes written in my own hand. Small, steady plans. The kind of life that doesn't ask for thanks or apologies, only space to grow.